Recorded Books Incorporated presents an unabridged recording of The Cookcamp by Gary Paulsen, narrated by C.J. Critt, and including an interview with the author. This work, copyrighted 1991 by Gary Paulsen, is recorded by arrangement with the author. This recording is copyrighted 1995 by Recorded Books Incorporated.
Hello, I'm Gary Paulsen. I hope you enjoy the Cookcamp. I'll be back at the end of the story to tell you more about it.
And now, The Cookcamp.
Prologue. For a long time, during a war, his father was in the army and had to be away to fight, and the boy had to go live with his grandmother. Of course, nothing happens that smoothly. Going to live with his grandmother didn't come about so easily. His mother had taken a job in a factory because she said they needed the money. The boy was only 5 years old, but even then, he knew they didn't need the money. Checks came each month from the army, and another came from his grandfather, his father's father, so they didn't need the money. It was that his mother was bored. She was bored and didn't want to spend endless days sitting in the apartment listening to the radio and drinking coffee and waiting. The boy knew, sensed that. He had heard her say it. He felt the same. He tried to tell her so, his mother. Tried to tell her he felt the same. But she didn't hear it in some way, and she took a job in a factory, and he was sent to live with his grandmother. Still, it didn't happen that smoothly. At first, his mother hired a babysitter and kept him in the apartment. But the babysitter was a crazy woman who sat and drank red wine and listened to and talked to the radio soap operas all day, and didn't bathe, and smelled bad. And so he was sent to live with his grandmother in the north. But even then what happened wasn't to be as gentle and smooth as that. He learned to be around the babysitter and to live with her, so his mother didn't know how bad it was. And when she asked if he liked the babysitter, he shrugged and said, "Sometimes she makes me hot cereal." He didn't add that the hot cereal was shredded wheat with hot water from the faucet poured over it, and didn't say how he had to drain it himself and find a spoon himself, or that the cereal came only in the afternoon when he was hungry and whined. So his mother was fooled, and he could have stayed with her and not gone to be with his grandmother in the North Woods. Except for the man. The man was tall and had blonde hair like his mother's, only much shorter. He had a thick neck and full shoulders and a wide smile with large white teeth, and his name was Casey. Casey came home from the factory with his mother one night. "You must say hello to Casey," his mother said. "He's your uncle, and is going to stay with us for a while." But of course, he wasn't an uncle at all. And that first night the boy came out of the bedroom in their small apartment and saw his mother with Casey on the couch making sounds he didn't understand, but didn't like. Sounds he didn't understand, but that made him want to not like Casey forever and ever. And his mother saw him staring at them on the couch. She pushed Casey away. She held the boy and cried. And the next day she pinned a note to his jacket and put him on...
Wave after wave of emotion washed through her, emotions attached to memories she couldn't access, memories of what another madman had done to her. Her instinct to flee had died with her opportunity to do so. Now she felt frozen in place, waiting. How would he kill her? With his hands? With a knife? How long would he play with her first? Would she be able to shut her mind down and escape the reality of what he was about to do to her?
Hypothetically speaking, he said, if I was a bad guy, you should pretend to be cooperative and compliant long enough to get me to step out of this hallway. Come along like a meek little lamb until we're out of this house. Then you bolt and run like hell. If I was a bad guy,
he reiterated. He let the possibility hang in the air for what seemed like minutes. Then he sighed and took a couple of steps back, releasing some of the pressure of the confrontation. Dana was shaking like she had hold of a jackhammer. She wrapped her arms around herself and held on tight. The relief that he might not have come here to kill her was at least as draining as the fear had been. Her legs turned to jelly, and she slid down with her back against the wall until she was sitting on the floor. "Please go," she whispered. "Please just go away."
I need you to come with me.
"You're not a cop anymore. I don't have to go anywhere with you. I'm not going anywhere with you."
You want to know what happened to your friend, don't you?
Dana said nothing for a moment. The answer was more complicated than a simple yes or no. Did she want to know that her friend had died the same horrible death she herself had somehow managed to escape? No. Did she want to know that angry words she had spoken might have sent Casey away and into the direct path of a killer? No. Did she want a resolution and answers to the questions? Yes. Did she want justice for her friend? Yes. Was she afraid of where those questions would take her? Very much so. Was she afraid of Dan Hardy? Absolutely.
We have a common goal, you and I,
he said, looking at her timeline.
That's why you came to me. Now I'm coming to you.
What do you want from me?
I want you to retrace your steps that day.
I've been trying to do that. I close my eyes and I try to remember.
No,
Hardy said.
I mean, we go everywhere the two of you went that day. We go through it step by step.
I'm not getting in a car with you, Dana said.
If I wanted to kill you, I could have done it by now.
Maybe you don't want to kill me, Dana said. Maybe I'll be found naked and beaten, wandering down a dirt road in a couple of days. His expression hardened. Dana wished she had at least gotten to her feet before sending him into a homicidal rage. She would have liked one last chance to at least try to get away.
You only know what you've been told, little girl,
he said, his voice a low growl, his dark eyes boring into hers.
You don't know me. You don't know anything about me. And you don't know anything about what happened.
Dana was afraid to blink. She tried to swallow, but her mouth was so dry she nearly choked.
You don't need to be afraid of me,
Hardy said. Why not? Dana asked bitterly. You're a man, aren't you? He looked at her for a long moment, his expression softening to something like sympathy.
You...
Beginnings. Our story begins in a world totally like our own, yet completely different. What once happened here in our own history seems
more than earned the right to think that way,
he said quietly. Dana still didn't trust him. I've been told you used to live to fuck with people's heads. He might have lunged at her and smashed her face with one of his massive fists. He might have leaned down and crushed her larynx in one hand. Instead, he laughed with a mix of amusement and bitterness.
You're a funny little thing,
he said.
Indeed, I do live to fuck with people's heads. There isn't much else left for me. Except this case,
he said, nodding up at the wall and the notes Dana had scribbled across it.
Are you going to help me with it, little girl?
I'm not getting in a car with you, Dana said again.
Suit yourself. We start here anyway, he said, pointing at the beginning of the timeline. Casey spent the night with you here. What do you remember about that night?
Nothing stands out. We slept over at each other's houses all the time. Well, she corrected herself. Casey slept over here more than the other way around. Her mother had a boyfriend from out of town. When he would come for a visit, Casey would stay here so she didn't have to hear them having sex.
Carl Florian,
Hardy said.
He was an insurance claims adjuster from Terre Haute. He and Ms. Grant had gone up to Indianapolis for a long weekend. They had solid alibis. So Casey came here and...
I read over my statement, Dana said. It didn't say we did anything special.
The statement isn't worth wiping your ass on,
Hardy said.
It doesn't mean anything. I don't want you thinking about what you told me 7 years ago. I want you to close your eyes and imagine that night. What do you see? What do you hear? What do you smell? Who else was here?
My mom was in Florida with my grandmother. We stayed in that night. It was raining. We ordered pizza. We watched movies, just normal stuff, nothing worth remembering. We didn't know that would be the last time.
What about your stepdad?
What about him?
Was he around? Did he hang out with you?
He was around. He had some pizza.
Was he ever inappropriate in any way?
Roger? No. He was kind of awkward around my friends. He wanted to be the cool dad, but he just wasn't.
Did Casey ever say she felt uncomfortable around him?
No, Dana said automatically, then took a moment to think about it, trying to remember any time she would have said his awkwardness had crossed a line. Nothing clear came to mind, but when she said no a second time, she said it with less conviction. Was Roger a suspect? She asked.
Everyone is a suspect,
Hardy returned.
Until I find an answer in a case, everyone is a suspect. You're a suspect.
Me? Dana said, offended at the idea. Why would I hurt Casey? He shrugged, indifferent to her feelings.
You were angry with her for something.
I didn't like her choice in boyfriends, so I killed her? Dana said, getting to her feet. That's ridiculous.
People lose their tempers,
he said, taking the black marker out of her hand and stepping up to the wall to add to her notes.
They lash out. They don't always mean it. Angry words get exchanged, a push, a shove, someone stumbles and falls, hits their head wrong. Just like that, you're a killer.
And I'm such a criminal mastermind. I hid her body without a trace of evidence anywhere. How did I manage that?
You'd manage that with help,
he said matter-of-factly. Who's my accomplice?
Your boyfriend, her boyfriend, your stepdad, your mom. Except she was out of town. She's in the clear.
You're out of your mind.
I'm just saying, this is how a detective has to think,
he said.
I can't worry about you getting your feelings hurt, little girl. I can't worry that your stepdad is a state senator. There's not a person on this earth that couldn't be guilty of murder in the right circumstances.
Yourself included? He gave her a long sideways look, but said nothing. Dana looked at the wall, at the note he had added to the timeline, saying that after leaving the nursery, Casey had returned to the house and picked up her things. Time undetermined. He capped the marker and checked his watch.
Let's go. I want to get to the grindstone before the lunch crowd.
22. Dana drove her own car to the grindstone, with Hardy following in a nondescript, older gray sedan. Not a pickup, she noted, though that didn't mean he didn't have one. She parked in the lot out in front of the restaurant and sat for a moment, rethinking the wisdom of coming here. She couldn't just walk into a place and go unnoticed. People would look at her, stare at her. They would recognize her and turn to each other and whisper. She jumped as Hardy rapped his knuckles on her window.
Let's go,
he barked, pulling her door open. I don't want to, Dana said. I changed my mind.
Why? You think everybody's gonna look at you?
Yes.
So what? You are who you are now. You can't hide for the rest of your life because you've got a few scars. If people don't have better manners than to look, fuck 'em. Come on.
Gee, Dana muttered. Why should I bother with a therapist when I can just spend time with you?
I don't know why you would anyway,
he grumbled, reaching for her arm to pull her out of the car. Dana jerked away. "Don't touch me. I'll get out when I feel like it. It's not like you're paying for my time."
"I'm dying," he groused. "I'd sooner not do it in a goddamn parking lot waiting for you to decide whether or not to risk your delicate sensibilities."
"Fuck you."
"Don't curse. It sounds ridiculous coming out of a little thing like you,"
he said as she got out of the car.
"Unless you're strong enough to knock him on his ass, never tell a man to go fuck himself."
"You're just full of life wisdom," Dana muttered, pulling up her hood.
"Feel free to stitch that on a pillow."
Dana walked toward the restaurant as if she was walking to her execution. She hadn't been to the Grindstone in years. The building sat a little bit separate from the other facilities on the property: Silva's garage, the island of fuel pumps, and the convenience store that also offered shower facilities for truckers. While the building itself was of simple concrete block construction, the facade of the restaurant had been decked out with weathered board and batten siding and a wide front porch lined with old rocking chairs, giving it a down-home country look. Dana's apprehension grew with every step. If she and Casey had crossed paths with Doc Holliday all those years ago, this would have been the scene of the encounter. He was known to have followed truck routes. He had snagged several of his known victims from areas just like this one, busy, high-traffic places where people came and went and were quickly forgotten, their faces blending into all the others that stopped there for 10 minutes or an hour at a time.
"What are you thinking?"
She flinched at the abrupt sound of Hardy's gruff voice. "Just that we spent so much time here, Casey and I, and our friends. We always came here after football games and basketball games. We never thought that it might not be safe, that someone we might have met here for a few minutes could have turned out to be—" She didn't want to say his name. She felt like if she said his name here, she might somehow conjure him up, like calling up a demon at a séance.
"He was just a man,"
Hardy said as they climbed the steps to the porch.
"Don't make him more than what he was."
He was just the man who ruined her life, destroyed her career, shattered her sense of self, damaged her brain and her face. He was just a man who had tortured and killed who knew how many young women.
"He got up in the morning and took a shit just like every other man on the planet,"
Hardy said.
"And when you killed him, he bled like any other man. Don't give him superpowers just because he got the drop on you once."
Dana wanted to argue with him that there was a lot more to what had happened to her, that it wasn't that simple, but she swallowed her protest. What man could understand the terror of being absolutely at the mercy of someone bigger and stronger, someone who had a boundless capacity for cruelty and an insatiable hunger for the suffering of others? Not many men would ever experience anything close to what she had experienced. From what Tim had told her, Dan Hardy had more in common with her assailant. He held the door for her to go into the restaurant. Dana stepped inside, and
The man who stole the book thinks that he's made it impossible for us to perform the play again. When he sees the malevolent comedy back on stage tomorrow, he'll be very angry. We'll have confounded him. Only for a while, Nicholas pointed out. He's still free to maim us in some other way. Next time, his measures may be more desperate. What do you mean? I'll tell you on the way. Then let's go to Matthew Lipton's house. Nicholas glanced at the table. I'm sorry to drag you away from your work, Edmund, he said. Is this the new play you've mentioned? I'd have moved on to that in due course. What were you penning when I came in? Hood gave a wan smile. A sonnet? Ah, you felt the warm glow of passion again. What I feel are the pangs of unrequited love. And the worst of it is, they seem to have dulled my brain. Tell me, Nick, he said, opening the door. Can you think of a clever rhyme for Ursula? Ursula Opie believed in the dictum that practice makes perfect. Seated at the keyboard, she studied the music in front of her and tapped out the notes with care and precision. She was so absorbed in her work that she did not hear the sound of her sister's footsteps coming up behind her in the hall. Bernice recognized the solemn music at once. "Why are you so attached to William Byrd?" she asked with a note of complaint. "The house is filled with him all day long." "Master Byrd is the finest composer alive," said Ursula serenely. "Father tells me that he's a devout Roman Catholic. Music is above denomination, Bernice." "How can it be?" "You only have to listen." "I'd rather hear something more lively," said Bernice, clapping her hands together. "Play a galliard so that I may dance." "I'd never do anything so vulgar." "Then let me hear a stately pavane. Anything is better than church music all the time. Oh, if only we had a house in the country." "Why?" "Because there is so much more merriment there, Ursula. Country people know how to enjoy themselves. Do you remember that first play we saw at the Queen's Head?" "It was The Faithful Shepherd, written by Edmund Hood." "It contained a whole host of dances," recalled Bernice. "The names alone were a delight to hear. There was Mopsy's tune, Dusty My Dear, and the Bishop of Chester's jig." "They were amusing enough, in their place," said Ursula primly. "When I saw the actors dance and frolic with such gaiety, I wanted to leap on stage and join them." Bernice twirled around a few times. The Faithful Shepherd was a delight. I never thought we'd be allowed to meet the author. "Master Hood was a proper gentleman." "And a handsome at that. Is it not so, Ursula?" "I did not notice." "Come, even you must observe if a man is well or ill-favoured." "I admire Master Hood for his intellect, not his appearance." "I take pleasure in both. He looked so fine at the concert." "The concert?" said Ursula, glancing up. "I did not even know that he was here. I hope that he did not think it rude of me to ignore him. I paid him enough attention for both of us, as long as he did not feel neglected in our house." "No, Ursula," said her sister dreamily. "There was no danger of that. When I could not speak to him, I watched him every moment. Such a noble countenance, such a modest manner. True enough. Such a kind and thoughtful being. I liked him more than Master Firethorn." "Oh, he was too fond of himself. Not so Edmund." "I liked him more than Owen Elias as well." "I like him more than any man. Bernice, why try to hide it from you?" She gave a brittle laugh and hugged her sister. "Oh, Ursula, I think that I'm in love." And she pirouetted around the hall by way of celebration. Basking once more in the love of his wife, Lawrence Firethorn was a portrait of contentment. Nobody would have guessed that his company was assailed from within by a demanding playwright and attacked from without by a mysterious enemy. As a result of the latest exigency, he was forced to participate in an act of collective repair. The malevolent comedy had to be forged anew. Firethorn sat in the middle of his parlour as if he did not have a care in the world, beaming at his friends and showing excessive courtesy to Matthew Lipton, their scrivener. 20 minutes in Marjorie's capacious arms had transformed him. Reading the telltale signs, the other members of Westfield's men were grateful to her. "Let's move on to the second act," decided Firethorn. "But we haven't mentioned my jig yet," said Barnaby Gill. "Well, we can take that for granted." "Indeed you will not." "Here the clown dances. That's all that is said in the play." "Then let that be set down," said Gill, nodding to the scrivener. "The first act is not complete until I've brought it to a conclusion." Gill's argumentative streak was slowing them up. Everyone else was resolved to bring the play back to life as quickly and painlessly as possible, but Gill's pedantry hampered them. Not content with recalling his own lines, he was disputing the accuracy of those remembered by others. There were 7 co-authors. Firethorn had invited Edmund Hood, Frank Quilter, Owen Elias, Barnaby Gill, Richard Honeydew, and the bookholder to join him. While their host was nominally in charge, it was in fact Nicholas Bracewell who controlled the exercise. The actors knew their own lines and cues, but he was the only one who was familiar with the play in its totality, and his prodigious memory came into its own. "What do I say next?" asked Quilter, groping for his line. "Nothing," said Elias, "for the speech is mine." "Mine, surely," contended Hood, "for the priest must speak first." "Wait your turn, Edmund." "I could say the same to you."
"Nick,"
invited Firethorn with a smile,
"give us instruction here."
"You are all wrong," said Nicholas patiently. "The speech falls to Mistress Malivol." "I thought so," agreed Richard Honeydew. "Why did you not say so?" asked Gill irritably. I was not given the chance." Honeydew was the only one of the boy apprentices there, but the other three were in the kitchen being fed and mothered by Marjorie. From time to time she brought drink and refreshment into the parlour, always pausing to give Nicholas a warm hug and her husband a kiss. The busiest person there was Matthew Lipton, a rangy individual of middle years with a habit of sucking his few remaining teeth. Copying out the words as they were dictated to him, he had difficulty in keeping up with Firethorn, who insisted on giving a performance rather than a simple, slow recitation. What simplified the whole business and gave it a firm structure was the fact that Nicholas had brought the plot of the play. He had drawn it up as a guide to the cast, dividing each act up into scenes and listing who and what was needed in them. In a comedy that relied on its pace, it was vital to have such a detailed record of entrances and exits. Changes of scenery were also marked, as were the cues for the musicians. During a pause for refreshment, Nicholas studied the plot. "Our thief was a stranger to a tiring house," he said, "or he would have taken the plot as well. Without that, our task would have been 10 times more laborious." "I find it laborious enough as it is," opined Quilter. "So do I," said Lipton, flexing his hand. "I begin to feel cramp."
"Fight it off," ordered Firethorn. "We need that neat calligraphy of yours until the bitter end."
He turned to Nicholas.
"So, the villain we seek is not a man of the theatre?"
"He may not be a man at all," replied Nicholas.
"An eunuch, then? Or a half-man, like Barnaby?"
"I'm no half-man," protested Gill, "nor an eunuch either." "The thief may well have been a woman," said Nicholas. "A young and beautiful one at that, according to Leonard. She asked him about the work of the bookholder."
"What does that lumbering oaf know about it?"
said Firethorn. "Enough to understand the importance of the prompt book."
"And you think this woman may have taken it?"
"It's a possibility."
"Would she have committed the other outrages?"
"No," said Elias. "What woman would stoop to using poison?"
"Marjorie, for one," replied Firethorn with a hearty cackle. "Had there been any in the house yesterday, she'd have poured it down my throat, then danced on my dead body."
"So much for the joys of marriage," remarked Gill.
"They'll be forever beyond your reach, Barnaby. You'll have to get your pleasure from being bitten on the bum by a rabid dog. Yes," he went on, looking at the scrivener, "set that down as well. The clown is bitten."
"Do not listen to him, Matthew."
"And you may add, on the right buttock."
"No."
"Change that, Matthew. Barnaby prefers the left."
"To come back to the matter in hand," said Nicholas, when Gill's protests had died down, "I believe that the man we seek may have a confederate. He certainly bought the poison from the apothecary and paid that lad to set rascal on us, but I fancy this woman is part of the conspiracy," he went on, "and I wonder if the reason may not be right in front of us." How so? Asked Hood. While we've been going over every single line of the play, I've seen things that did not strike me so much in performance. Look at the three women whom Lord Lovelace sets up as rivals for his hand. Rosamond, Chloe, and Eleanor. The characters are excellently well drawn. Well, that's so throughout the play, Nick. Not always, said Nicholas. There's real flesh and bone on all three ladies, and it brings them to life. He glanced at Honeydew. The same goes for Mistress Malaval. There's a depth and definition to her that several of the men lack. What do you read into that? I'm not sure, Edmund, but I do begin to wonder if Saul Hibbert's women may be based on real people. They behave as if they do, and if that's the case, Nicholas speculated, none of them would be pleased to see the play, for it pillories all four unmercifully. That's where the comedy lies, said Gill fussily. Would you want to be shown as a cat, an owl, or a monkey? For that's what happens to the three women. Nor does Mistress Malaval come out of it with any credit. She's portrayed as a malevolent snake who schemes her way into Lord Lovelace's affections. No, Nicholas concluded, Saul Hibbert has little affection for his ladies.
Then the play does not have the ring of truth at all, said Firethorn, for Saul has far too much affection for the fairer sex. When I spoke to him earlier, I had to prize him from a hotbed of passion. The fellow adores women.
He uses them, surely, said Hood. But I sense no adoration in the man, except for himself. Passion, once past, can leave only scorn in some men. I side with Nick. The ladies in the play are poorly treated. Everyone takes a knock in the malevolent comedy, said Gill. But those most hurt are Rosamond, Chloe, and Eleanor. They are swinged soundly throughout. I wonder what their real names are. What does it matter? Let's get back to our work.
All in good time, said Firethorn, musing on what he had heard. Nick may have seen something that eluded our gaze. Women can become frothing demons in an instant, as I learnt to my cost only yesterday. If one of them was turned into a laughingstock on stage, she'd seek revenge. Could that be the reason our prompt book was stolen?
It all comes back to one question, said Nicholas.
Go on.
What do we really know of Saul Hibbert?
We know him for a playwright of exceptional talent.
And exceptional vanity, added Quilter. We also know him for his spite and malice. Nick was the victim of that. Master Hibbert will never be a true member of a company because he despises us. Gill preened himself. He does not despise me or my work. But where did he come from? Asked Nicholas. How did he get here, and what did he do before he came? Where did he learn to turn a line and shape a scene? In brief, who is Saul Hibbert? Cyrus Hame was just about to leave when his landlady showed in the visitor. He was taken aback to see Saul Hibbert standing there. The newcomer had lost some of his overweening confidence. I hope that I'm not intruding on your time, Cyrus, he said. No, no, come in. You said that I might call upon you? Upon me or upon John. Though, should you go to the Vavasor residence, said Hame, indicating his untidy little room, you'll find it more commodious than my humble lodging. I'd rather talk to you. Then take a seat and let's converse. Not if I'm holding you up, Cyrus. The lady will wait, said Hame, with a confiding grin. They sat either side of a little table. How may I help you? I wish to ask about contracts. That's something you'll have to discuss with Giles Randolph. Only he can sign on behalf of Banbury's men. But Is he a fair man? Do his terms favour the playwright? We made sure that they did. You have control over your work. Why do you ask? Lawrence Firethorn slipped terms into the contract that I barely noticed in my readiness to sign. I've lived to regret that. Other authors have said the same of him. Master Firethorn is slippery. Does he want another play? More than one. But you have not committed yourself. No, said Hibbert. I wanted to speak to you or John first. You claim that Banbury's men will pay me more and treat me better. We can only talk from our own experience. It's much happier than mine. A playwright should go where he's most esteemed, said Hame. Look at John Vavasor. He was reviled by one company and welcomed by another. Lawrence Firethorn was brutal to him. I'm less than satisfied with Master Firethorn myself. Then you have a remedy within your grasp. Do I? John and I have told you as much. But the power of decision lies with Master Randolph. Naturally, said the other. But we came to you with his authority. He trusts our judgment, and knows that we would not offer praise lightly. For reasons too obvious to relate, Giles is unable to attend a performance at the Queen's Head, even if he were not on stage every afternoon. He went on with a sly grin. I doubt that he'd ever find his way to Gracechurch Street, any more than Lawrence Firethorn would go to the Curtain. So, you've delivered good reports of me to Banbury's men. Giles cannot wait to embrace you. How much would he give me in advance? In advance? Against my next play? Said Hibbert. The truth is that I've spent too freely since I've been here, and need the funds to keep me while I work on my new play. Giles will not buy a pig in a poke, cautioned Hame. That's not what he'll be doing. I'll be able to show him a first act and tell him the plot of the whole play. The malevolent comedy has attested my merit. Its successor will have even tastier pork on it. Let me talk to Giles. Soon, please. My purse grows slacker by the day. Then we are two of a kind, said Hame companionably. We sail before the wind of our creditors. John had the good fortune to marry money. I can only seem to spend it. I share that fault, Cyrus. I'm a man of extravagant tastes. There's no disgrace in that. But what of Westfield's men? What of them? No ties of loyalty to bind you? None, said Hibbert bitterly. After all that's happened, I break with them at the drop of a hat. Cyrus Hame lifted his hat in the air and let it fall to the floor. Saul Hibbert laughed. Having come for help and advice, he was going away reassured. A profitable future seemed to open up before him. They left the room and stepped out into the street. Hibbert went his way. His spirits were lifted and his arrogant strut restored, but long after the two of them had parted, it was Cyrus Hame who was still laughing. Midnight bells were chiming when Nicholas Bracewell finally got back to Bankside. Forsaking the bridge, he had been rowed across the river by a talkative waterman with an interest in the stars. Nicholas was given a lecture on astrology that owed more to the ale the man had drunk than to any serious study of the subject. Arriving back at his lodging, he was pleased to see a light burning in Anne's bedchamber. He let himself into the house and tiptoed upstairs, opening her door as silently as possible. "I'm still awake," she said drowsily. "Did you get my message?" "Yes, Nick. It was kind of you to send it." "George Dart blamed himself for the loss of the book," he said. "He was so keen to atone in some way that I took advantage of him. I felt that you ought to know what was afoot." "Was the play reconstructed?" "To the last letter." You have always had an amazing memory. It does not compare with Lawrence's. He holds over 30 parts in his head. When we go on tour, said Nicholas, he can play any one of them after a mere glance at the prompt book. And where is the book for the Malevolent Comedy? Right here, Anne. He patted the manuscript under his arm. I'll lock it away before I come into bed. May I get you anything? Yes, please, she whispered. Nick Bracewell. He kissed her gently on the forehead, then went along the passageway to the room that he had rented when he first moved in. Since he now shared a bed with Anne, he used the room for storage. The most important item there was a large oaken chest, ribbed with iron and fitted with 2 locks. When he used his keys to unlock the chest, he opened the lid to reveal the history of Westfield's Men, a collection of prompt books that went back over the years and that had been carefully annotated by the man in charge of them. It was a theatrical treasure trove. After adding the new play to the collection, he closed the lid and locked the chest again. Shortly afterwards, he was blowing out the candle beside the bed and snuggling up to Anne. Will you be in danger tomorrow? She said. I hope not. Every time you've played the piece, there's been misfortune. The actors are all too aware of that, Anne. Most of them would love to see the back of the Malevolent Comedy. They think it brings bad luck. Frank Quilter said that it has the mark of the devil upon it. What do you think? That the mark is more likely to be upon the author. Then more trouble lies ahead? We'll be ready for it. Good. She pulled him close. At least you'll be back where you belong. What brought Lawrence to his senses? Necessity. He deserved to be severely scolded for what he did. Marjorie took on that task, he said, smiling. She's more skilled in the black arts of torture than Master Topcliffe at the Tower. I've her to thank for putting her husband on the rack. Marjorie defended me. She should not have needed to do so. I'll waste no sleep worrying on that score, he said. It's been a long day. Tomorrow we face another trial. Would you like my eyes in the gallery again? No, thank you. I can spare you this time. Besides, it would be cruelty to make Preben sit through a second performance. He's not recovered from the first yet. Are all Dutchmen so gloomy and severe? Jacob was not, she replied, or I'd never have married him. He could be very jolly at times. Preben is more serious. He has been in England for years, yet still bears the stigma of being a stranger. But, she added, I did not stay awake simply to talk about him. I want to hear the gossip. There's little enough of that, Anne. No quarrels? No scandal among the actors? All I can tell you is that Edmund is in love. That's to say the Thames is full of water. Give me news. This is news, said Nicholas. I had it from Owen. He brought 2 sisters to sup with Edmund, and one of them enchanted him. Our love-lorn poet is already writing a sonnet to her. Is that good or bad? Good for us, but bad for Edmund. Bad for him. According to Owen, he's fallen in love with the wrong sister. Her name is Ursula, and she's no interest in men unless they compose religious music. Edmund is doomed to worship from afar. You said that it was good for Westfield's Men. Very good, Anne. Why? It's made him start writing again. Edmund Hood lay on his bed fully clothed and stared at the ceiling. Enough moonlight was spilling in through the shutters to dapple the walls. Tired, but unable to sleep, he wrestled with the 14 lines he hoped would win the heart of Ursula Opie, arranging and rearranging them constantly in his mind until he reached a degree of satisfaction. There was a secondary problem to be addressed. Did he send the poem to her anonymously, or disclose his identity? If she was touched by it, then she should be told the name of its author. If, on the other hand, she was offended in some way, it was better that she should not know its origin, or grave embarrassment could ensue. After long cogitation, he settled on a compromise. Hood decided to append the letter E to his sonnet, both admitting and denying that it was his work. E could just as well stand for Edward, Eustace, Edgar, or a number of other names, allowing him to disclaim authorship if any discomfort threatened. To a woman susceptible to noble sentiments expressed in high-flown language, however, it could represent only one poet, and she would respond accordingly. Hood had recovered from the disappointment of the concert. Shy in public, Ursula had not lingered in the hall. Like him, she was a private person, a creature of thought and deep feeling. A young woman, as the concert had shown, with a strong spiritual dimension to her life. Bernice had sung her songs prettily, but Ursula had played with a commitment that revealed how much more the music meant to her. Hood yearned for her. With the sonnet bursting to come out of him, he leapt off the bed, lit a candle, and reached for his quill. There was no hesitation. The words, over which he had pondered so long, now came streaming out of his brain in the perfect order. After reading the poem through, he felt a surge of creative power. It needed no correction. Instead, he set it aside, pulled another sheet of parchment in front of him, and started to work again on his play. Sustained by the knowledge that it had been inspired by Ursula Opie, he laboured long into the night. When the first cock began to crow, Hood, impervious to fatigue, was still crouched low over his table. Nicholas Bracewell set out very early the next morning with the prompt copy of the Malevolent Comedy in a satchel slung over his shoulder. By the time he had crossed the bridge and entered Gracechurch Street, the market was already underway, its booths, stalls and carts narrowing the thoroughfare, its customers thronging noisily, its vendors extolling the virtues of their produce aloud, and its poultry squawking rebelliously in their wooden cages. Nicholas's broad shoulders soon found a way through the press, but he did not turn into the Queen's Head. Walking past it, he went on to the parish church of St. Martin Outwich, on the corner of Bishopsgate and Threadneedle Street. Built over a century earlier, the church stood beside a well that was served in earlier times by a device that allowed one bucket to descend the shaft as the other was pulled up. A pump had now been installed, and when Nicholas went past, housewives were queuing with buckets to draw water. The funeral of Hal Bridger had taken place the previous day. Out of deference to the wishes of the parents, Nicholas and the others had stayed away, but he wanted to pay his respects to his young friend. It did not take him long to find the grave in the churchyard. A fresh mound of earth rose up through the grass. A simple cross was standing over it. Nicholas came forward and removed his cap. Looking down at the grave, he tried to recall happier times in the boy's short life. He remembered the smile of astonished joy on Bridger's face when he first hired him to work for Westfield's men, and the fierce pride he took in performing even the most menial duties for them. Apart from Nicholas, the lad's closest friends in the company had been George Dart and Richard Honeydew. They had spent many pleasant hours together. Cast adrift by his father, it had meant so much to Bridger to be accepted by his new family. He had repaid them with his love and dedication. Nicholas felt the sharp stab of bereavement. It made him even more determined to find the killer. Until that happened, Hal Bridger could never fully rest in peace. Closing his eyes, Nicholas offered up a prayer. He then put on his cap and turned to walk away, realizing for the first time that he had been watched. A woman was standing by the church porch, so still and silent that she might have been a marble statue. It was Alice Bridger. There was a long and very awkward pause. Nicholas was made to feel like an interloper, guilty of trespass, intruding upon private grief. He did not know whether to stay or leave. In the event, it was the woman who made the first move, walking slowly towards him and looking much more frail and vulnerable than at their first meeting. Clearing his throat, Nicholas held his ground and prepared his apology. Alice Bridger needed a moment to find her voice. "Thank you," she said softly. "For what?" "Showing that you cared." "We all cared about Hal." "Yes, but yours was the name he mentioned most." He glanced down at the grave. "We kept away from the funeral." "I was grateful for that." "What about Mr. Bridger?" "My husband will give you no thanks, sir," she said brusquely. "He believes that we lost our son twice. Hal died when he left us, and he was murdered because of you." "Simply because he joined a theatre troupe?" "It's an ungodly profession." "Then why are we not all struck down, Mrs. Bridger?" asked Nicholas gently. "If our sin is so unforgivable, how have we and the other theatre companies in the city escaped retribution?" "You are trying to mock me again." "No. I respect anyone who lives by the tenets of their faith, even though you do not have a faith yourself." Nicholas hunched his shoulders. "It was wrong of me to come so soon," he said, "and I apologize for that. I should have let more time elapse so that feelings were not so fresh and raw. Think what you wish of us, Mrs. Bridger, but be sure of one thing. The prayer I said over Hal's grave came with Christian humility. God save his soul." "Wait," she said, touching his arm as he turned to go. "Yes?" "You told me how Hal died, but you did not tell me in what pain he must have been. The coroner was more honest." "I wanted to spare you such details." "I understand that now. It was a kindness on your part." Her lips began to quiver. "Will they catch the man who poisoned him?" "That's a task we have set ourselves, Mrs. Bridger." "What can you do?" "Much more than any officers," he replied. "I've already found the apothecary who sold the poison. The customer he described was seen at the Queen's Head talking to one of the servants. If he dares to come again, he's certain to be recognised." "He'll not return, surely?" "He already has, I fear." "When?" "On Saturday last. He paid a boy to set loose his dog during our performance, so that it would harry the actors. And yesterday," said Nicholas, patting his satchel, "the same man, or his confederate, stole our prompt book." "Why did he do that?" "To stop the play being staged." "I do not understand how." "That's because you've never ventured into a playhouse, Mrs. Bridger. There's only one complete copy of any play, and it's used to prompt the actors if they lose their lines. It's also the only way that the book holder can follow the progress of a performance." He patted his satchel again. "I've a new copy of our play right here." "Which one?" "The Malevolent Comedy." "Was that not the play that cost Hal his life?" "Unhappily it was." She was rueful. "So, his murder was part of a comedy?" "His murder was part of an attempt to stop this play from being seen. It's happened 3 times in a row now. Someone has such a violent grudge against the piece that he's determined to sweep it forever from the stage." "Oh dear," she cried, tears coursing down her cheeks. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Bridger. I did not mean to upset you." "It's cruel." So very cruel.
What is?
You say that this man wants to wipe a play from the stage.
By any means.
Then I find myself in sympathy with him, for I'd stop every play from being performed and spreading his corruption. Can you not see the awful cruelty of that?
She went on, tears still flowing.
I am at one with the man who murdered my own child.
There was no rehearsal that morning. After 3 recent performances, it was felt that the cast were sufficiently confident to need no extra time spent on their lines. In any case, the hasty conference that had taken place at Lawrence Firethorn's house the previous day had involved all the leading actors and been in the nature of an intensive rehearsal. They now knew the malevolent comedy better than ever before. Instead of working on the play again, therefore, they were deployed to search the premises to make sure that no danger was lurking at the Queen's Head. Keeping the satchel with him, Nicholas Bracewell took care that he never once lost sight of the prompt book. Richard Honeydew was curious. When the actors were starting to gather in the tiring house that afternoon, he went over to Nicholas. "Where did you keep the book last night?" he asked.
"Under lock and key."
"How many plays do you have in your chest?"
"Oh, 50 or 60 at least, Dick."
"What would happen if they were all stolen?"
"Do not even conceive of such a tragedy," said Nicholas. "We would be bereft. There's no way that we could rebuild each play brick by brick as we did with Master Hibbert's comedy. Most would be lost forever. The company would wither for lack of anything to play."
"I'd hate to lose the loyal subject."
"Is that your favourite?"
"Along with The Merchant of Calais."
"Both plays by Edmund Hood."
"Hal Bridger thought our best play was Cupid's Folly."
"That'll please Barnaby, for he steals all the laughs in it."
Hal giggled whenever he thought of the play.
Honeydew's face darkened.
"You'll not see it ever again, Nick."
"I know."
"When they buried him yesterday, I wanted to be there."
"So did we all," said Nicholas. "Hal's stay with us was short, but he made many friends among Westfield's men. The pity of it is that his parents bear us such ill will."
"He rarely spoke of them. They cast him out."
"Yet they grieve for him now, Dick, or at least his mother does."
"How do you know?"
"I met her in the churchyard this morning when I went to pay my respects at the grave. Mrs. Bridger was there."
"Does she still blame us for what happened?"
"She blames the whole notion of theatre. It's abhorrent to her."
"We do no harm,"
said Honeydew, innocently. "We do in her eyes, Dick. And you are one of the chief culprits."
"Me?"
"Boys dressing up as women, painting their faces, flaunting themselves on stage, making lewd gestures and exciting improper feelings in the spectators. That's how Hal's parents view us," said Nicholas sadly. "We are purveyors of sin."
"All that we strive to do is to entertain people."
"Puritans do not believe in entertainment, Dick."
"Well, then I'm glad we do not have any of them in our audiences,"
said the boy.
"But since the church is so close, I'll try to say a prayer for Hal myself as I go past."
"Do that."
Honeydew went off to put on his costume, and Nicholas cajoled 2 of the other apprentices who had arrived late. There was a distinct tension in the tiring house. Superstition had taken its hold. About to embark on a 4th performance of a play, the actors all felt in their hearts that it would be prey to some mishap again. The general unease was even shared by Lawrence Firethorn.
"Is all well, Nick?" he asked.
"I think so. We've taken every precaution."
"We did that last time."
"The book will not go astray this afternoon, I warrant you."
"There are other ways to damage us."
"We'll be ready for them, whatever they are." said Nicholas.
I hope so. Marjorie is in the audience today.
After last night, I'd have thought she'd heard enough of the malevolent comedy. It invaded your house for hours.
That only served to increase her interest, said Firethorn. For her sake, I want the performance to go well. If we get safely through the play today, it may even cheer Saul up.
Is he still surly?
Surly and critical. He has not forgiven me for making him accept you as bookholder again. That festers with him.
Did he thank you for our efforts to rewrite his play?
No, Nick. He still wants George Dart dismissed for losing it.
Since when can a playwright pick and choose hired men?
I made that point to him.
Good. Master Hibbert is still very new to the playhouse.
His novelty is wearing off for me,
confided Firethorn.
When he first appeared, I thought he had come to lead us to the promised land. I did not realize that it would be beset with cups of poison and renegade dogs. I'm not so ready to commission a second play from Saul Hibbert now.
Nicholas was relieved, but he said nothing. Time was running out, and from the commotion he could hear in the yard, it sounded as if another large audience was waiting for them. The flag had been hoisted above the Queen's head to show that a play would be performed, and the musicians had taken up their places in the gallery above the stage. Owen Elias, in a black cloak, was running a tongue over his lips as he rehearsed the opening lines of the prologue. Everything was ready. The strain on the actors was almost tangible. Nicholas tried to lift it. After warning everyone in the tiring house with a wave, he sent a signal up to the musicians. When the trumpets blared and the drum...
I don't know what kind of woman you would have discovered later. I'm not sure I could have found my way back. You did a great job, Mom, said Lee. He gave her, then me, his father's eager, open-faced smile. Yes, said Terrell. Thank you for everything, Mr. Ford. Lee sat forward, set his hands on his knees. I thought of Dalton sitting right there not long ago, getting ready to toss his prosthesis at me. Mr. Ford, said Lee, I'm going to cut to the chase here. Mom and us wanted to thank you and to pay up, but we have a larger mission. I'm going to run for Dad's assembly seat in November, and we'd like to have you and some TV ads with Mom. Everybody knows what the Chaos Committee did to her, and how you came to the rescue. You can't find a Republican in the county who won't vote for me in Dad's honor. And plenty of Dems, too, what with the terror scandal around Ms. Safar. The money is pouring in. The media is all over me. I'm a write-in because of the filing deadlines, but I've got a shot at it. My surprise was swift but short-lived. Of course Dalton's son would try to turn his father's death into an opportunity. Pure straight. I'll be creating the TV ads, said Terrell. But you'll have editorial freedom to say what you want. You've only got 130-some days, I said. Not a problem, said Lee. How old are you? 20. But you only have to be 18 for the California Assembly. So I feel that destiny has handed me a Big Mac, and I'd be a fool to hand it back. Terrell closed his eyes and slowly shook his head. Their mother smiled. Almost the same smile she'd always had. Almost the same sweet spirit behind the same sweet face. But less light now. Reduced wattage. Purposefully withheld or frightened out of her. Temporary or permanent. Impossible to tell. We'd like to shoot a spot this evening, said Lee. Right, Terrell? Ideally, his brother said. Some establishing scenes at Dad's grave out at Rosecrans. We'd like you to be standing there, looking down with the markers all around you, while you talk in voiceover, remembering Dad's character and courage. All like that. You can write that part. No, but thank you. Why not? Asked Lee. I've my privacy to protect and a business to run. A puzzled stare from Lee. Fine, Mr. Ford, but don't forget that Dalton Strait is a true American hero. Mr. Ford is a hero, too, said Natalie. I wouldn't be here if not for him. Then how about a heroic campaign contribution? Lee asked. I really hope to continue Dad's work and improve on his record. I want to get student debt under control. I think I can get things done across the aisle. I picked up the envelope that Natalie had set on my desk, stood and handed it to Lee. Good luck, I said. Thanks again for everything you did. You'll remember this day when they swear me in. An awkward silence. Natalie was the last to leave. She stopped in the doorway and turned around. I heard the boys clomping down the old wooden stairs. I owe my life to you, she said. Mainly to Dalton. She looked out at me from within her substantial hauntings. Why did you go to the San Diego FBI? I asked. To talk about the finances. Early on they tried to turn me against Dalton. And Asclepia headquarters? A soft flinch. Mackenzie Doyle. I saw one of her texts to Dalton. Wanted to have a look at her. Why? Just filling in the details, I said. I like your boys, especially Terrell. He showed me a day in the life, and it lit a fire under me to locate you. I saw how much you are loved and needed. He's another one of my heroes, Terrell. Hold on to the good memories you have of Dalton, I said. They're your friends. They can help you find your way. You've had experience at that. We all will. She gave me a long stare and a short smile. So many storms. I heard Lee's voice booming from down in the foyer. Reminded me of Dalton when he'd finally learned that Natalie was still alive. I won't be going back to the dealership, she said, or running Lee's campaign. It's time to fix some of the things that got this family into our financial mess in the first place. I can take full-time work when I'm ready. We'll be okay. Dalton had a small life insurance policy he'd kept secret, and there's some veterans' money for his death and disability. I pled down to 1 count from the feds in return for telling the truth about what happened. I'm really looking forward to better days. For all of us. Lee shouting up again. You'll get some better days, Natalie. Goodbye, Roland. After dinner with the irregulars that night, I excused myself for a walk around the pond. Triunfo led the way. The sun hung low in the west, over a layer of dark clouds gliding in from the Pacific. I found my usual boulder, and the dog scratched his way up beside me. We watched the sun go down, and I waited for the flash of green, which I have never seen but some people say exists. Something to do with gases and refracted sunlight, though perhaps only an optical illusion. No flash of green on this June night. I sat a while and let the last of the light dissolve around me. Felt the cool creeping up from the earth. Let the good thoughts in. Turned the bad ones back. Finally got rid of thoughts altogether. After being knocked out in that fight and carried to my stool, I sat there and watched myself, but from above, disembodied, and I understood that there are 2 of us, one who does and one who watches. Understood that I had been beaten, but would fight again. Sitting on that rock in the dark, I watched my thoughtless self for a while, then got up and walked home. Later, I drove to a ballroom dance club downtown, where you can always find a willing partner. Saturdays are Latin madness there, so I was all of that, late into the night. This is Will Dameron. We hope you have enjoyed this unabridged production of Then She Vanished by T. Jefferson Parker. This program was directed by Tony Hudds. Executive producer, Nick Martorelli. Text copyright 2020 by T. Jefferson Parker. Production copyright 2020 Penguin Random House, LLC. All rights reserved.
What? He asked with a great show of exasperation. What do you want from me, Kojak? You want me to cop to Curtis? Fuck you. The deal is done and I didn't do him. The county attorney didn't press it because they got shit. But they'll let it hang on my rep. They'll say they got me cold for Franz and saved the state some money on a trial. And that's okay by me. It won't do me no harm to have the boys at the Heights think I did a cop. But I didn't do Curtis. You want to know who did Curtis? You ask your homicide sergeant, Springer. He knows who did Curtis. Kovac let that hang in the air for a moment, as if maybe he hadn't even been paying attention. He looked off into the middle distance, smoking, wondering how sick it was to actually enjoy the feel of tar and nicotine settling in his lungs. Yeah, he said at last, turning back to Verma. Then why didn't he nail the son of a bitch? On account of the son of a bitch was another cop. Says you. Says that good-looking boy from Internal Affairs. I don't know what you mean, Kovac said, nerves tightening. Lean muscle, pretty like a Versace model. Verma closed his eyes and hummed to himself. Yummy. Uh-huh. So this IA weasel comes around and talks to you. He tells you balls out he thinks a cop whacked Curtis? Verma stuck out his lower lip and slouched. Kovac wanted to smack him. Yeah, I thought so, he said. What did he ask you about? Verma shrugged. This and that, stuff about the murder, stuff about after the murder, the investigation. I use the term loosely. And you told him what? Why don't you ask him? 'Cause I'm asking you. You ought to be happy about that, Ronaldo. You rank above IA. Then again, so does the clap. I tell him I didn't kill Curtis, and I don't care how many cops want me to say different. Not him. Not Springer. Not the uniform. What uniform? The one gave me this, he said. Pointed to the higher of the two bumps on the bridge of his nose. Said I was resisting. I apologize on behalf of the department, Kovac said without remorse. This uniform have a name? Big dude, Verma said. Studley Steroid, I called him. He didn't like it. His partner called him B.O. He didn't seem to mind that, he complained, flinging up a hand in disgust. But I guess that was short for something besides the way he smelled. I read his name on his chest just before he knocked me out. Ogden. Ogden, Kovac repeated, the flashback coming so fast it damn near made his head swim. Steve Pierce wrestling on the floor of Andy Fallon's kitchen with a human moose. The moose stumbling to his feet with blood gushing from his nose. Ogden. Verma got a deal because your people fucked up, Chris Logan said bluntly as he dug through a drift of paperwork on his desk. Talk to Cal Springer about chain of evidence. Ask him if he knows dick about the specifics of a search warrant. Something was funky about the evidence? Kovac stayed on his feet near the door of Logan's small office, ready to bolt with the prosecutor, who was due in court in 5 minutes. Logan swore under his breath, still staring down at the mess on his desk, hands on his hips. He was a tall, athletic type, early 30s, with good looks and a big chip on his shoulder. A tough guy with a law degree and a quick temper. He was a good prosecutor. Ted Sabin's sword arm, seeing as the county attorney rarely tried a case himself. Everything was wrong, Logan mumbled. He dove for the wastebasket sitting beside his desk, tearing through crumpled paper, discarded candy wrappers, mutilated bags from half a dozen takeout places in the Skyway system that connected into the government center. He came up with a yellow wad the size of a softball, spread it out, and scanned the handwriting. After a moment, he blew out a sigh of relief and rolled his eyes heavenward. He crammed the paper into the briefcase and headed for the door. Kovac followed, then matched him stride for stride. I'm due in court, Logan said, weaving his way through the population in the hall outside the county attorney's offices. I don't have a lot of time myself, Kovac said. He wondered if Savard had followed through on her threat to call his boss. She was too tough a read to say for sure one way or the other. Who could say how long before Leonard yanked him in for the big talk? They stepped into an empty elevator, and Kovac badged the people trying to get on behind them. "Police business, folks, sorry," he said, hitting the closed door button with his free hand. Logan looked unhappy, but then he looked that way a lot of the time. Everything we had
already awake. She had a small mirror hung on a nail by the sink, and she was looking in the mirror while she braided her hair, which hung down in long ropes. The gray, like frosting mixed with black cake, hung down to her waist, and she braided it while he watched, with graceful movements of her hands. One over the other, over the other, over the other, he thought. Her hands move like small birds, flying one over the other, over the other, over the other. He loved to watch her comb and braid her hair. She was his grandmother, and very old. But when she combed and braided her hair, he thought she looked like a girl next door in the Chicago apartment, who combed her hair and braided it on the back stoop. His grandmother saw him watching and smiled at him. "Why are you up so early, little thimble?" she asked. "Gustav said he would take me on the cat." "Oh, you heard. I thought you were asleep when he said that." The braid was done, and she raised it over her head and coiled it in back at the top of her head. The boy sat up, stood by the stove. Did he mean it? Is he really going to take me with him? She winked. "I don't know. What do you think?" "Oh, Grandma, you're teasing me." "I am I?" "Aren't you? Come now." She used a ladle to put steaming oatmeal in a bowl. "Eat some breakfast." She mixed milk in a bowl and poured it on the oatmeal. "So you will be done eating when the men come." The boy sat in front of the bowl and ate with a large spoon. The oatmeal was very hot, and it made the milk smell funny, but he sprinkled sugar on it and held his breath and ate it, and it tasted good. He had just finished eating when the door burst open and the men came in for breakfast. And he was kept busy running back and forth with bowls of oatmeal and pancakes. But he kept his eye always on Gustav, who ate and ate. When the men were done, they all stood up and thanked his grandmother and moved out of the cook trailer. Gustav went with them, and the boy felt the edges of disappointment. Except that at the door, Gustav stopped and turned. "Well?" He smiled and winked at the boy's grandmother, then looked at the boy. "Aren't you coming?" The boy looked up at his grandmother. She nodded, and he ran to the door. Gustav took him around the waist, lifted him, and went out the door carrying the boy on his arm. Outside, the other men had gone down a path through some trees, and in a moment the roar of diesel engines filled the air. Gustav moved off in another direction, the boy on his arm. They walked down a narrow road through the trees until they came to a large clearing. In the middle of the clearing was an enormous gravel pile. The boy had never seen anything so huge. "I can't see over it," he said to Gustav. "What is it?" "It's the gravel pile," Gustav said, "for building the road. The cat is around the other side." The boy was so excited he could hardly bear it. As they walked around the side of the pile that went to the sky, the boy saw a big caterpillar tractor parked at the bottom of the pile. Gustav walked to the side of the cat and put the boy up on top of the steel treads next to the driver's seat. Everything was yellow and oily, and there were levers and dials all over the tractor. He stood on the treads and didn't dare touch anything. "Hang on to the seat," Gustav said, "while I climb up." The boy did as he was told. Gustav went around the cat. He stopped and did something to the engine, then climbed into the seat and put the boy on his lap between his arms. The boy leaned back. Gustav's hands flew across the controls, hitting levers and switches, and there was a sudden roar as the engine caught and started. Blue flame splattered up out of the exhaust pipe, and the boy jumped. The engine roar grew louder and louder still, and Gustav's hands moved again, and the bulldozer, the cat, suddenly lurched forward. The boy closed his eyes, then opened them once more. They were climbing up the face of the gravel pile. Gustav's strong hands worked the two steering levers and guided the bulldozer up and up the gravel pile until it came to the top. The boy almost fainted. They were high, so high he could see all around. He saw the cook trailer, where his grandmother was working, and the trees that went on and on forever. And out in front of the pile, below and to the right, were all the dump trucks in a line. At the bottom of the gravel pile was a large grate made of heavy steel. Trucks would pull beneath the grate, and gravel would pour down until the truck was filled. There was a truck beneath the grate now, waiting, and before the boy was ready, before the boy could think what was happening, Gustav made the engine roar louder, worked the lever so the huge blade lowered, and the cat roared over the top of the pile and down, down toward the grate, toward the hole. The move was so sudden that it made the boy scream and grab at Gustav's arm. But the sound of the engine covered his scream. It seemed they couldn't keep from tipping over to the front. So steep was the side of the gravel pile. The cat roared down on the grate and hole with the blade pushing a huge pile of gravel. When the gravel hit the grate, it dropped through and disappeared in a great cloud of dust and whumped down into a dump truck. The truck moved away, and another truck took its place. But before the boy could really see what was happening, Gustav's hands worked the levers, and the cat stopped dead, and suddenly slammed backward up the pile again. To the top. To teeter on the top and hold for a moment, seeming to fall, and then down again to pour another load off the blade into the hole, and another truck filled and jerked away. And back to the top. "It's like a ride," the boy yelled up at Gustav. "At the fair." He had once been to a fair, and his mother had taken him for a ride on a small roller coaster where she held him. "It's like the roller coaster." This time he yelled his loudest, and Gustav heard him. He smiled and spit over the treads. "Ja, ja, it's fun, huh?" But there was no time to answer, because Gustav had worked the levers and the cat was barreling down again. Except that this time Gustav grabbed the boy's hands and put them on the levers beneath his own, held them inside his hands, and then let the boy steer the cat as it backed up the pile, and again held the boy's hands on other levers to shift and throttle the cat down with another load. All morning. He sat in Gustav's lap all morning, loading the trucks with gravel to make the road. When it was midday, the boy was covered with dust and dirt and half deaf from the roar of the engine, and had never been so happy in his life. "We must eat now," Gustav said, turning the cat engine off. "Then there is more work, ja?" Chapter 9. The boy followed Gustav as he walked to the cook trailer. All the other men had stopped the trucks and were walking to the cook trailer as well. And the boy walked with them, trying to walk as they walked, with his shoulders back and taking long steps. And he spit and cleared his lip like the men. He had so much to tell his grandmother about the gravel pile and the cat, and how it tipped up and down and frightened him. And when he came into the cook trailer, he ran to her. She was at the stove and smiled at him. "You're dirty." "Oh, Grandma, I rode the cat, and Gustav put my hands on the levers, and I got to drive and steer and raise and lower the blade, and we rode to the top of the gravel pile and down." All the words ran together, and his grandmother held up her hand. "Later. Tell me all of it later. Now you have to eat." The men trooped in and took their caps off, slammed them against their legs to knock the dust off. And the boy did the same with his hands, wishing he had a greasy cap to slam against his leg. He moved to the stove to eat, sitting on the bunk. Except that he didn't eat at the stove as he had before. Didn't have to wait until the men were done. Didn't have to help with the tables this time. "When we are men, we must eat with the men," Gustav said, and motioned to an extra plate next to his on the table. Other men nodded and smiled, and the boy went to the bench and sat at the plate and looked at his grandmother, who also smiled and nodded. He tried to make himself bigger, but he couldn't, and still he felt proud that he could sit with the men, although he noticed that one of them, a man named Olaf, helped his grandmother bring food to the tables. Gustav heaped food on the boy's plate, and he tried to eat it all, but couldn't. Couldn't eat even a part of as much as the men ate. And when he was so full with stew his stomach was about to burst, he looked up at Gustav. "I can't eat more." "Then you shouldn't have taken it," Gustav said. But he was smiling, and he used his fork to scrape the boy's food onto his own plate, from which it quickly disappeared. The boy was so full he couldn't eat pie. When they were done, Gustav started to leave, to go back to the cat, and the boy started to follow. But Carl, the man who had come to the depot to get him, stopped him with his hand. "Gustav doesn't get you all the time. I need help driving the dump truck this afternoon." The boy looked at Gustav, who nodded. "We must share you. Good men are hard to find." And the boy knew he was joking, but it still sounded nice. Again he looked to his grandmother to see that it was all right, and again she smiled and nodded, and he went out with Carl. It was the same truck they had come in from the depot, but he was not asleep this time, and there was much, much more happening for him to see. Carl's truck was third in line. The boy watched the other trucks drive under the grate and watched Gustav on the cat push the loads of gravel down the pile into the trucks where they landed with great noises and clouds of dust. Finally, it was Carl's turn, and he growl-whined the truck forward under the grate. The boy tried to lean over Carl and see Gustav use the cat, but it was too far back and up to see through the grate. Suddenly, the truck lurched sideways as the load of gravel dropped down into it, and no sooner had the dust begun to settle on them, bouncing off the hood, than Carl worked the levers and the throttle and the truck whined forward. And out of the gravel pile place and down a long dirt road with new gravel on it, fresh and damp looking to the boy, like cereal, out and down the road where they met other trucks coming back empty until they reached the end of the road, where there were 2 more cats and a grader. The bulldozers would plow the trees over with their big blades, and when the trees were gone, the gravel trucks ahead of Carl's truck would dump their loads and the grader would even it out. Finally, it was Carl's turn. The last truck dumped with a great raising and sliding sound and turned and headed back to the gravel pile, and Carl moved his truck forward. When it was in the right position, he reached out the window and pulled a lever with a rope on it, and the bed of the truck whooshed and raised slowly. The boy could feel the gravel slide out of the truck onto the ground, feel the truck bounce as the weight left it, and Carl pulled the lever and turned the truck around while the empty box was coming back down. And then he started the long journey back to the gravel pile. Except that he turned to the boy and said, "Do you want to drive?" He made room in his lap for the boy, who moved to sit there and hold the wheel and steer it under Carl's hands, as he had steered the cat under Gustav's hands. And they met trucks and saw deer, and he steered and didn't have to make engine sounds with his mouth, because the truck made them fine without him. All the way back he steered, and into line for the next load. And he thought of all the things he had seen and done, all the many things he had seen and done this day that he could tell his grandmother about tonight, when they had apple pie and the milk with the taste of tin in it. Chapter 10. They had eaten supper, and all the men had gone to the sleeping trailer, and the boy sat with his grandmother at a table. It was dark, and he was very tired, but she had given him a piece of cherry pie she'd made with canned filling and a glass of the warm milk that tasted of tin, and he was trying to remember all the things of the day to tell her. "It was so much fun," he said. "I drove the cat first, and then the truck, and steered and worked the shift lever. Carl let me sit in his lap and spit out the window and wear his cap with a button on it and press the horn, except that it didn't work." "Eat your pie," she said, pushing his hair away from his forehead with the back of her hand. It was a soft touch, like a kiss with her fingers. And he paused and ate a piece of pie, but couldn't stop telling her of the day. And before he knew it, before he could stop himself, he had said things about Uncle Casey. "We had fun, too," he said. "Uncle Casey took me to the zoo once, and to a movie where cowboys rode and jumped on a stagecoach and shot the guns out of other cowboys' hands. And I thought I would never have as much fun as I did with Uncle Casey. But then he and Mother made the sounds on the couch, and I didn't have fun with Uncle Casey anymore. But it doesn't matter now. Now I'm having more fun with Gustav and Carl and you than I ever had with Uncle Casey. His grandmother's face had changed. The smile was still there, but it had become tight, and the edges of her eyes looked hard, so that the boy trailed off and couldn't say more. It was anger, but more too. She was more than mad. He thought something must hurt her, and he knew it was what he had said, but didn't know why it would have hurt her to say he had fun with Uncle Casey. She stood from the table and turned away from him, and picked up the fly swatter that hung by the stove. It was the kind of swatter that was made from a screen and had a picture of a circus clown on it, and a red wire handle. And she went to the window over the sink and hit a fly. Small hits, the boy saw. She used little flicks of her wrist, and even when he didn't see the fly, a fly would fall. She didn't say anything for a long time, just went around the trailer flicking at the flies, dropping them on the floor. And when she was done, the boy watched her the whole time, she took the broom and dustpan and swept each fly body up to dump in the wood stove. She's thinking of something else, the boy thought, watching her kill flies, as when his mother would speak to him but be looking at something else, not thinking about what she was saying. His grandmother was killing the flies but not seeing them, not thinking of them, not caring about them except to kill them. And when she was done, she turned to the boy once more and sat at the table and pushed the hair away from his forehead. "Tell me," she said, "about Uncle Casey. Do you like him?" So the boy finished his cherry pie and warm milk and tried to think first if he liked Uncle Casey or not, and decided he didn't. "But he is fun," the boy said. "Sometimes he takes me to movies, and we go to the cozy corner, and he drinks beer with Mother and gives me nickels for the jukebox and fried chicken. And he took me to the zoo, and we laughed at the monkeys." "But you don't like him?" "No, I don't like him. Sometimes he looks at Mother and doesn't see me. And when they are together, well, I just don't like him." And again her face grew tight, but this time she didn't get up or move away. "It's late now. Why don't you go to bed?" "Aren't you coming to bed?" "No. I have some things to do to get ready for tomorrow." She helped him to bed and tucked him in and kissed him on the forehead. And he could smell the lavender water she used in the morning on her neck. And he fell almost asleep. She sang softly for him, with her hand on his forehead and his eyes closed. It was a song about a young girl, and she didn't sing it in Norwegian, but in English, so he could understand. The song was sad, and in a story, and he wanted to hear it. But sleep came before she reached the end of the song, and he didn't hear more. He didn't know how long he slept, but he awakened before morning. A strange sound cut through his sleep, and he opened his eyes. His grandmother was sitting at the table nearest the stove. She had an oil lamp on the table, and a small tablet, and a stub of pencil in her hand. She was wearing small glasses that sat on the end of her nose, and she was writing on the tablet, the pencil making tiny scratching sounds. And while she wrote, she talked, spoke down to the paper. "Damn war," she said. "Damn the war, and damn the men, and damn the cities that take the girls." And here her voice changed, and became lilting and high, and made the boy think of his mother. "Remember who you are," his grandmother said, the little pencil squiggling. "And how it was before the war, when the men were different. You mustn't be this way." And she was crying down onto the tablet, tears dropping on the paper. The boy started to say something, tell her he was awake, but he held back. Something about her tears stopped him from making a sound, and instead he got out of bed quietly and went to her and hugged her. "It's all right, Grandma." She held him. "I know. Everything will be all right. You'll see." Which made no sense to him, because he had just had a day when he drove the cat and steered the truck, and everything was already as all right as it could be. But he said nothing. She put him back to bed and combed her hair down and came to bed herself. And he fell asleep almost at once and didn't awaken until the men came in for breakfast. Chapter 11. For days, things got better and better and better. Carl let him drive the truck again and spit out the window, and then all the other men seemed to want him, and he rode in their trucks as well until he knew them all. Sven, Ola, Nels, Harvey, Emil, Altag, Pete. He knew all their names, and the way they laughed and joked and spit and wore their caps. He rode with them all, and drove the gravel pile cat again, and drove everything but the cat that cleared the forest ahead of the graders so that there could be a road. He rode with everybody except the road cat. And each night, when they were done eating, and the men had gone to the sleeping trailer, he would sit and eat pie and drink milk, and tell his grandmother all about each day before he went to bed. And each night she would stay up when he was in bed and write a letter, which she put in her apron pocket. There was one for each day, one letter in a small envelope for each day, and each night she cried and swore and killed flies, even when there were no flies, and came to bed when she was done. On Friday, Carl came to her instead of going to work with his truck. The boy was sitting at a table finishing his oatmeal, and he looked up at Carl, thinking the truck driver wanted to take him with him to work again. But this day was different. "It's time to go to town," Carl said. "I'll warm the truck and you and the boy get ready." Once a week they had to go to a town that lay 30 miles away by rutted, narrow road, and the boy hadn't known it. They had to go buy supplies for the camp. "Where are we going?" he asked as they walked to Carl's truck. Why aren't we going to work?" "We're going to Solvang," his grandmother said. "We need food." "For the men? And you? Is there a store in Solvang?" "Yes." They climbed into the truck, and Carl started driving down the dirt road, shifting through the whining gears. It was a beautiful morning with the clear blue sky. The trees along the road were so green in the morning sun they hurt the boy's eyes. For a short time, Carl drove down the same road the boy had come on from the depot, and he thought he remembered the way. But then they turned off onto a side road that was worse than the one they'd been on, and soon it was so rough the truck bounced from side to side. They came to a stream, and the road disappeared into the water, and Carl drove the truck right through the stream. They saw a moose. It was huge and brown, standing in the middle of the road, and it didn't move until Carl beat the truck's horn, and then it only walked slowly away, all but ignoring the truck and the horn. When it seemed to the boy that they would never get out of the woods, the trees suddenly fell away from the road and opened into cleared fields and farms. In the distance, he saw a metal water tower with a word written on the side. He couldn't read the word, but his grandmother leaned over and said, "It's Solvang," into his ear so he could hear it. It was a small town. After Chicago and the apartment buildings, Solvang was almost not a town at all. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the boy said. 5 houses I count. And that was all of Solvang. 5 houses and 1 store where Carl stopped the truck. But when the boy followed his grandmother and Carl inside, he saw it was like no other store he'd ever seen. The store seemed to sell everything in the whole world. Inside, it was dark and cool, and there was a high ceiling made of molded metal, all pressed in a design with flowers in it. The boy stared at the ceiling while his grandmother talked to the man who owned the store. Stared until he became dizzy and had to hold his grandmother's dress to keep from falling over. He looked down at the walls, but there were so many things to see, he still had to close his eyes to stop the dizziness. There were buckets and tubs and axes and ladders, and leather harnesses, and bags of feed stacked higher than even Carl could have reached. There were rolls of brightly colored cloth, and layers of canvas belting, and stacks of cans of food, and a huge metal bin with a picture of crackers on the side. And a glass counter full of pocket watches and pocket knives. "Oh," the boy said, because on top of the counter was a large glass jar of candy. "Oh," he said again, and pulled on his grandmother's dress. "See it?" She nodded and put her hand on his head, yet seemed not to hear. But the store owner looked down at him and smiled and handed the jar down. The boy looked up at his grandmother, and she said, "Go ahead." He took a green candy with red stripes and held it up to the light to see the colors before he put it in his mouth. It was very sweet, with a sharpness in the green part that made his tongue feel cool. He sucked on the candy slowly, hanging on to his grandmother's dress, and she told the store owner all the things she needed. Potatoes, 150 pounds. and the same of flour, and some yeast, and 5 gallons of syrup, and 30 cans of tomatoes. Her voice went on as she read from the list, but the boy didn't really listen until the very end. At the end of the list, she said, "I want the smallest engineer cap you have, and also the smallest set of children's bib overalls you can find, for the boy." "And that pocket knife in the case," Carl said. He was leaning over the glass counter. "The one with the black handle and the eagle on it." The storekeeper took the knife out of the case and handed it to Carl. Carl turned to the boy. "Here, don't cut yourself." The boy couldn't believe that Carl had given him the knife. He held it tightly in his hand and looked at it closely. It had 2 bright silver blades and a shiny black handle. On the handle was a picture of an eagle holding arrows in its talons. It was the most beautiful thing the boy had ever seen. "Thank you," he said to Carl. "It's so pretty." He turned to his grandmother. "See how the eagle shines?" She nodded and smiled and pushed the hair out of his eyes, but was still speaking to the store owner again. "I need to mail some letters," she said to him. "Can you do that?" The store owner nodded. "They go out every Monday." "She's down in Chicago," the boy's grandmother explained. "Will the letters go that far?" "Absolutely." "Good. Here." She handed him all the letters she had written through the week, sitting at the table each night. From her apron pocket, she took a coin purse and gave the store owner change for stamps. "Mail them," she said, her voice tight. "Mail them good and hard." "I will," the store owner said. Then the owner and Carl loaded all the groceries in the back of the dump truck by lifting the tailgate. Then his grandmother, Carl, and the boy traveled back to camp the same way they had come. But the boy saw none of the country. He sat the whole way back, holding the knife in his hand, turning it this way and that so the light shone on the eagle. It was so beautiful, the most beautiful of all things. And he suddenly wished that he was with his mother, so he could show her the knife. He missed her so much it hurt, but he said nothing, just sat between Carl and his grandmother, looking at the knife. Chapter 12. The boy thought life in the cook camp could just go on and on, except for missing his mother. Summer days mixed with summer nights in the cook trailer, and it all seemed to be more of a home than even Chicago was a home, except for missing his mother. In the days, he would either ride with the men in the trucks or on the cat, or play outside the trailer and use the pocket knife with the eagle on it to make little wooden houses or stick fences and stick animals. And he only cut himself 2 or 3 times, when he would go crying in to his grandmother to get a bandage. And that was all right, except for missing his mother. In the evenings, he would sit with his grandmother after the men had gone to the sleeping trailer, and eat pie, and drink warm milk made from the can, and swat at the mice that ran around on the floor with a broom, and listen to her sing songs about her childhood in Norway. And that was all right, except for missing his mother. And the days could have gone on and on, the the boy thought, except that as the men made it, the road went farther and farther from the camp, and they had to move the cook trailer and sleeping trailer to get closer to the end of the road, so they didn't have to drive so far to sleep or eat. Moving day was a time of large excitement. He helped his grandmother pack dish towels around all the dishes in the cupboards, and tape all the drawers and doors shut, and lift the steps to the cook trailer and put them in on the floor. Then the men hooked the trailer to one of the trucks with a steel pin, and they drove down the road with the boy and his grandmother sitting in the truck. The boy tried to see the trailer out the back window of the truck to watch it being pulled, but the dump box blocked the way and he couldn't see it. Carl noticed him and put him in his lap, from which the boy could watch in the outside mirror as the trailer bumped and bounced down the road in the back of the truck. He thought how strange it was to watch your whole house bouncing down the road, and he thought of the chairs inside, and all the wrapped dishes, and his bed bouncing and bouncing as they drove down the road. "What about the mice?" he asked his grandmother. "What?" She had been speaking to Carl and hadn't heard him. "What about all the mice in the cook trailer? When we get to the new place, they won't know how they got there. Their whole house is bouncing away. What about them?" Carl laughed, and his grandmother smiled. "They take their home with them," she said, "just like us. They have beds and nests in the trailer, and it doesn't matter where they are. That's their home." Just like me, the boy thought, but didn't say it, and missed his mother. "I miss Mother," he said, but the words were lost in the grind and whine of the truck motor, and his grandmother didn't hear them. It took almost an hour to get to the new place for the trailer, and then another half-hour to back it into position and get it level. All the men helped by grabbing the hitch and the corners and rocking it around until it was straight and they could set up the steps. As soon as the trailer was in place, the boy ran inside to see what had changed, but nothing had fallen or broken. Everything looked as they had left it before they started to move. "We have to pull all the tape from the drawers and doors," his grandmother said, "and get food ready for supper." He helped pull the tape and wad it into a sticky ball and set all the salt shakers out on the tables and get the chairs straight, and was just starting with the pepper shakers when there was a loud yell from outside, and 2 men came in the door carrying a 3rd man between them. "Clear a table," one of the men yelled to the boy. "A tree fell on Harvey and crushed his arm. He's out cold." The boy stood frozen, looking at the man hanging between the other 2, and he wondered if the man was dead. He looked white as the milk from the cans, and his eyes were open and showed white as well. His grandmother stepped around the boy, moving very fast, pushed the salt shaker to the end of the table, and helped them put Harvey on his back along the tabletop. "Get his legs up," his grandmother said. "Hold them up." One of the men took Harvey's legs and held them with Harvey's ankles on his shoulders. "A tree backed," the other man said. "Came back down across the cat and through the cage. It caught his arm on the side rest." And the boy saw that his arm was mangled and crushed and bleeding. His grandmother worked so fast that her hands were almost a blur. She found scissors and cut the sleeve away from his shirt, and cut it away from the wound and brought some water in a pan with a dish towel and washed it as best she could. Then she found some tape in a drawer and her breadboard that she used for kneading dough to make the bread. "Raise him," she said to the men, and they lifted Harvey up enough so she could slide the board under his elbow, and she taped the arm to the board and then the board to his body. Taped, and all of it the boy watched. Then, because his legs were raised, Harvey came to, and his eyes focused, but he couldn't say anything. He grunted with it, and swore, and didn't see even that there were other people in the room, but just kept grunting with the pain and swearing in a low voice. "We have to get him back to the depot," the boy's grandmother said, "and down by train to Pinewood, to the doctor." "I'll take him," Carl said. He had come in. The boy's grandmother nodded. "I'll have to go as well in case he goes back into shock from the movement." "What about the boy?" Carl said. "We could be gone 2 days, waiting for a train." "He'll stay with the men," she said, and looked at the boy. "You'll be all right, won't you?" And he nodded without thinking what he was doing, still watching the man on the table, seeing his eyes dull with pain and the blood on his arm and the table, and wondering how it could be that anything could hurt that much and the man not cry and ask for his mother. "You'll be all right," his grandmother repeated. "You can sleep tonight and tomorrow night in the sleeping trailer with the men." Harvey grunted again, this time ending with a small whine, and she motioned to the door. "Take him out now. I'll follow." They carried him out, 3 men this time, one to hold the crushed arm, and the boy followed them, trying to see all the things there were to see, trying to see Harvey's face again because it looked so strange. But they were gone too fast. They loaded him in the front of Carl's truck, and Carl and the boy's grandmother got in, one on each side to hold Harvey up between them. And they started the long drive to the depot, and the boy watched them leave, watched them drive away until the truck was nothing but a small dot between the rows of trees on the new gravel road. Then he turned to the cook trailer. All the other men had gone to their trucks and back to work, and he went into the cook trailer and sat alone at the table for a time, and missed his mother. But she wasn't there, and after a little more time had passed, he took out his pocket knife and looked at the eagle, and went outside to find a stick to carve smooth, as he'd seen some of the men do. And in this way he kept busy all afternoon, until the men finished working and came to eat supper. Gustav came first. "Is the food ready?" Gustav asked him when he came up to the cook trailer and found the boy sitting outside. "No. I don't know how to do it." "Well, come and help me and learn then, boy," Gustav said, and smiled. "Then you can make slum stew for us tomorrow." Of course the boy knew Gustav was just joking, that he wouldn't really have to cook. But he followed Gustav in and set the tables while Gustav fired up the stove. He put a huge pot on the stove and peeled potatoes, and the boy helped him peel, watching his pocket knife take the gray skin off in short, thick pieces, while Gustav's peelings came off long and thin. When the pot was nearly full of potatoes, Gustav added a can of some kind of meat and cans of carrots, and put the lid on, and made a large pot of coffee while they waited. "Ever have coffee, boy?" Gustav asked. And when the boy shook his head, he poured coffee into a thick cup with 2 spoonfuls of sugar and canned milk, and stirred it and handed it to the boy. The boy sipped it, expecting to burn his tongue, but the milk had cooled the coffee, and it tasted like thick, sweet, almost chocolate. "It's good," he said to Gustav. "Sweet." "Just 1 cup. It will stunt your growth, and you'll never get big enough to drive the trucks yourself." Of course, the boy didn't believe Gustav, because all the men drank coffee and none of them had stunted their growth, or they wouldn't have seemed large as houses when they came in the trailer. But they didn't talk more and sat drinking the coffee, the boy feeling the edges of being a man, until the other men came in to eat the stew Gustav and the boy had made. Chapter 13. He tried to eat with the men again, eat as much as they ate because he had to be with them alone, but he couldn't. They ate stew with salt and pepper thick on it, ate it with spoons and joked about how bad Gustav and the boy were as cooks, which was only partly true. When they were done eating, and the men had used their fingers to wipe out the pot, licking them clean, they all leaned back and put snus in their lower lips and sat to talk for a little time. The boy tried to listen, but it was all talk older than he could understand. "She's using oil now worse than ever. I think her rings are gone. My dump is taking so long I could take a nap while she gets rid of her load." It all swam in his head. Talk of valves and fluids and yards of gravel and Harvey's arm went into his ears. But the room was warm and his stomach was full and nothing made sense to him. His eyes closed, and he would have slept, leaning against Gustav, except that Gustav picked him up and carried him to the sleeping trailer. "Big day for little ones," Gustav said. And though it wasn't dark yet, he tucked the boy into Harvey's bunk. The bunk smelled of man's sweat, almost a stink, but still nice in the boy's nose. And he fell asleep wondering about Harvey's arm and missing his mother. Always that, missing his mother, even in sleep. He didn't sleep well. Gustav put him to bed so early it was just barely dark. For a time he seemed to sleep hard. But in the darkness his eyes snapped open, and he lay for a moment trying to remember where he was. Around him there were all the sounds of the men, breathing and snoring and rasping, and he was frightened because it sounded like monsters, and he could see monsters and all the shadows in the trailer. Moving with the moonlight that came through the windows and slanted gray bars, they seemed to dance around the room on the walls. The monsters, not the men, seemed to be making the sounds, and he sat up and closed his eyes. When he opened them, he could see the other bunks, with the men sleeping, and smell the men sleeping, and hear that it was the men making sounds, and the monsters were gone. The trailer was so strange. There was nothing soft in the men's sleeping trailer. In the cook trailer with his grandmother, there were curtains on the windows, and a fresh smell of lavender water, and bread cooking, and brown sugar. And here it was all hard. The windows had no covers, no curtains, no soft edges, and the sounds and smells were thick somehow. But it didn't frighten him any longer, and he went back to sleep with the blanket wrapped around him. In the morning he was awakened by coughing and spitting. It seemed that every man woke up and coughed and sat in his underwear hacking and scratching before he would get up and go to the door and open it to spit outside. It was still dark. "Wake up, boy," Gustav said. "We have to go make coffee and get to work." The boy rolled out of bed and slipped his shoes on and followed Gustav outside, where he tried to cough and scratch and act like the men, though it didn't seem to work very well. They went to the cook trailer to make coffee, and when it was boiled in the big pot on the stove, Gustav made some biscuits that everybody complained about, even though they ate them all. The boy saw one man cleaning up the crumbs with the edge of his hand and eating from his cupped palm. Then they went to work. All that morning the boy rode in a truck with the man named Pete. He had hands as big as one of the burners on the wood stove in the cook trailer, and chewed snus that he spit all the time. Sometimes he would spit out the window, and sometimes he would spit on the floor of the truck, and sometimes he would spit on the dashboard of the truck. It looked to the boy as if he had been spitting on the dashboard for a long time, because the buildup of dried and sticky tobacco juice was over an inch thick. Pete's continuous spitting looked like fun, and so the boy tried it, spitting first out the window, then on the floor and the dashboard. And he would have spent the whole day spitting and spitting, but soon he ran out of it, because he didn't have snus to make more. And still, there was the whole day left. The boy became bored, finally, and the day seemed to drag until he thought he'd never been anywhere but in the truck, was born in the truck, and lived in the truck. He made a whole game of being in the truck, and because he missed his mother, he thought of how it would be to live in a truck with his mother, so that it would be a home. There could be curtains over the windows, and a small table with small chairs, and a small radio where he and a small Clara could listen to the radio, but they wouldn't allow a small Casey. He missed his mother. And in the end, sitting that long day in the truck when all his spit was gone, in the end, he missed his mother so that he could hardly stand it. At last, the day was done, and all the men came back to the cook trailer. The boy helped Gustav make another pot of stew, and it only bothered him a little that they didn't clean the pot from the night before. He ate with them, and helped to clear the tables, and sat in Gustav's lap while the men played cards and slapped the cards down and laughed and swore. But he had seen the cards before, and watched them play before, and seen the inside of the cook trailer before, and he couldn't be excited by it any more. And he missed his mother. Sitting there in Gustav's lap, he wanted to cry. And before he could stop it, he was crying, which embarrassed him because the men could see him cry. "What's the matter?" Gustav asked. "I miss my mother," he said. "I miss my mother, and I want to go home." The crying grew worse, and he wanted to swear at himself for crying in front of the men because it embarrassed him. But he didn't yet know how the words worked for swearing. dirty damn," he said. But it just made the feeling worse, and he grew sadder and cried harder until he was gulping with it. All the men thought they could cheer him up, and they tried making faces and tickling him and laughing and holding him, but it still only seemed to get worse. He couldn't stop crying, and finally he just sat in Gustav's lap and cried until the tears wore out. Then he sniffled and sipped some warm milk one of the men made for him. Warm milk with sugar in it, and it didn't feel so bad. He still missed his mother and felt sad, but something came from all the men, all the big and dirty and smelly men, something warm and soft, and he finally fell asleep in Gustav's arms again. Chapter 14. Gustav carried him to Harvey's bed in the men's sleeping trailer. But the boy was not so sound asleep that he couldn't hear them talking. "Poor little guy," one of them said. "It's this damn war," another said. "Women out working in the cities. Who ever heard of such a thing? He should be with his mother, and never mind this other business. Poor little guy." The boy wanted to tell them that it was all right, that he didn't mind the war or living in the city. But they all went to bed without turning on the lights, and he fell back to sleep. In the morning, when he opened his eyes, his grandmother was there. Like magic. He had been asleep in the men's trailer, and when he awakened, the men were gone, and his grandmother was sitting on the edge of Harvey's bunk, brushing the hair away from his eyes, smiling down on him. "Good morning, little thimble," she said. "Where is Harvey?" he asked. "He had to go be in the hospital for a while, so they can fix his arm. I learned all about spitting yesterday." "Oh, you did you?" He nodded. "In the truck. We spit and spit until I couldn't make any more spit. I drove the truck again and played cards, and then I cried." "Why did you cry?" "Because I miss Mother. I like to be with you and the men and the trucks, but I really miss Mother." Here he started to cry again, and he bit his lip to make himself stop. "Do you want to go home?" his grandmother asked. He nodded. "Yes, I want to go home and be with Mother." She smiled. "Well, then, I have good news for you. When we took Harvey to the hospital, I went to the telegraph office and sent a telegram to your mother." "What's a telegram?" "It's a way to talk over a wire." "Like a telephone?" She nodded. "Something like that, except that the message comes in writing, like a letter over the wire." She reached into her apron pocket. "And your mother sent a wire for you." She unfolded a yellow piece of paper with wings across the top. "This is for you." He took the paper. There were letters all over it, and words. He knew all the letters by heart, but didn't yet know how to make them into words. "I can't read what she says. Would you read it to me?" She took the paper back and read it to him, moving her finger along with the words as she read. Dear Pumpkin. She calls me Pumpkin, he said. Sometimes. Do I look like a pumpkin? You must stop talking, or I can't read to you. I'm sorry. Dear Pumpkin, Mama writes that you miss me and want to come home. I miss you too very much and want to see you. So I'm sending you some money for a ticket, and Mama will put you on the train, and you can come back to Chicago. I love you. His grandmother put the yellow paper on the table, and he looked at it and touched it with wonder. So much in just some words on the yellow paper with the wings at the top. All about his mother and her loving him and wanting to see him and be with him, and how he would ride on the train 2 nights again and see her and not miss her any more. All on the paper. All of his life on the yellow paper there on the table in the cook trailer. I'm going home, he said to his grandmother. She nodded. When? Not tomorrow, but the next day. And he thought of that and found his hand going out to her apron to hold it. But I will miss you too. She was crying now, but he smiled. Why don't you come with me, and we can all live together, and I won't have to miss either one? But she shook her head. No. There is a time for living apart, and your mother has come to that time. She must have her own life. None of this made sense to the boy, but she had such a tightness to her voice that he didn't say anything. And the day passed while he played around the cook trailer and helped his grandmother set the table and feed the men. There was nothing different, and yet there was. Something had changed. He seemed to be waiting, and his grandmother seemed to be waiting, and even the men seemed to be waiting. But the boy couldn't understand why, except that he was to leave. That night he had a piece of apple pie with milk made from the can, and mice came out and ran around the floors, and the boy and his grandmother chased them with brooms and a fly swatter, and they screamed, and the boy laughed until he nearly peed in his pants. Then they sat on the bed, and his grandmother held him. She told him stories of what it was like when she was a small girl in the old country, and later when she came over on the boat as a half-grown girl. And her husband, who became his grandfather, a man the boy never knew. Clarence, she said as she talked of him. His name was Clarence, and he had straight shoulders, and could outwork 3 men. Her eyes had a light in them when she said his name. She told of their small farm in the northern prairie, and of animals they owned, and how it was when his mother was born. She told of all the times of her life, sitting there in the cook trailer, of all the sad times and happy times, of her wedding and the death of her husband, his grandfather, of the farm when he was gone and how she had to sell it and go to work. Told of how Clarence would sit in the evenings and play on a violin he had made himself from planed spruce boards. Told of men who came to court her when he died, and how she turned them all away. told of summer evenings and winter storms, of hot days and cold nights, of mountains in Norway and trees that were so big.
He crossed his arms and took several paces away from me, probably to pout. Silence fell between us again, and that was fine by me. The less I had to hear that prick's voice, the better off all of us were. We remained as such for a time. He'd taken to kicking around a small ball of fire he maintained with his mana, and I took advantage of not having monsters breathing down my neck to examine my dagger more. There was still a dull blue glow to it, and I wondered if Gawain's gun was made of the same material. Impossible, I thought, because the Rhine was still in the testing stages, and it was only just discovered recently. I supposed Arwen and Poppy could have developed another weapon, though. I certainly wasn't going to ask Gawain. Even if he did know, he probably knew less than what someone like Arwen would, and I'd rather get my facts from a reliable, likable source. I could also still feel my pulse thump in my hands as I held the blade, and it was warm to the touch. It wasn't hot enough to burn, unlike when I'd had it at my hip before. I still wasn't sure what that was all about. Maybe the heat really only flares up when I'm in danger? I didn't know. I was definitely no scientist, nor that knowledgeable of a mage. Perhaps I would be one day. For now, I was just a first-year summoner taking his practical exam with a cute girl, a friend who didn't used to be my friend, and a glorified daddy's boy with a platinum spoon shoved so far up his ass he couldn't walk right. The little fireball Gawain had been bouncing around with his feet fell to the ground and disappeared into smoke. He sighed, clearly bored while we simply waited for something else to happen. Maybe this was all our round in the Magicka would be. We'd already fought a horde of beasts, as well as another Baroker. That seemed to be the pattern to these things anyway. When you defeated me in the duel that night, I lost a part of myself, Gawain began out of the blue. I scoffed as I put my dagger back into the sheath at my side and crossed my arms over my chest. More like I bruised your precious ego. You did, Gawain admitted. And it was the first time in my life that I'd felt that kind of humiliation. Serves you right, I quipped. Gawain chuckled a little and mimicked my stance. Anyway, the rumors that I went to train are true. With a monk, far off and away to the west in the mountains? I asked, half serious. Is that what people are saying? Gawain's eyes grew wide, and I nodded, unable to contain my amusement at his horror. Ugh. So if that isn't true, where did you go? I prodded. If you must know, I did go to the mountains, but I trained on my own, he clarified. I quirked an eyebrow. On your own? Doesn't that kind of defeat the purpose of learning something? Gawain looked offended that I would even suggest such a thing. Of course not, you stupid yokel. I don't know how they do things in the wilds, but I would have thought that they would have taught you folk to be self-sufficient, unlike us enclavers. You got one thing right, I retorted. We're definitely more self-sufficient. Then you should know the value of finding strength within yourself to know when to take matters into your own hands, and learn where you can be better. He finished off his statement with a bite, and I eyed him as he stared at the ground. I do know, Gawain, I started. I just never thought you were the type to admit you have faults. As I said, you forced me to find a great deal of humility in myself that night. I might come from a family where money is everything and magic is twice as such, but I knew the moment you spared me that if I ever planned on facing you again, I needed to not only be a stronger fighter, but a stronger person. Gawain sighed and tossed me a sidelong glance. Are you challenging me to another duel, Maddox? I snorted. Not yet, Gawain said. You'll still beat me now. But one day we'll duel again, and we'll see who the better mage really is. I shook my head as I laughed. I look forward to it. I wasn't sure what happened. Did Gawain, Maddox, and I just have a conversation that didn't involve us wanting to throttle one another? That in and of itself was once unheard of. Maybe he was simply playing nice because we were still being watched. Though if that were the case, he wouldn't have acted like such a dick earlier. Whatever the weird exchange happened to be was short-lived, however. The ground beneath our feet quivered again, a signal that more monsters were coming. But more than that, as I looked around the shadowscape, something was different. Where ruins of an outlying village laid before, the remnants of what used to be the very arena in which the Magikai Nido now took its place. Beyond that, where it was once barren, there were now torn-down broken trees that overlapped the ruins in sort of an odd splice effect. The stench that normally accompanied the inside of a rift seemed to grow more potent as well, and the sky was also a different shade of green in some places. In fact, the shade change fell in line with the destroyed arena, and the oddly cracked trees that now jutted weirdly out of the ruins that had been before. At the same time, we noticed that flares shot up in the direction of where Varlith and Aaron were headed. Flares weren't good. Flares meant that they were in some deep shit, as Oren had put to me upon my first trip into the shadowscape with the squad. My stomach lurched. What the bloody hell is going on? Gawain's eyes narrowed, and the jokes and good nature were set aside. No sooner had he asked the question, did I formulate an answer. A rift opened up inside of the arena, I replied flatly. And admittedly, there was a tremor of terror in my voice. What? Gawain went rigid, and took a few steps closer to me. What the hell does that mean? It means this isn't a test anymore, Maddox, I shouted at him, and he gritted his teeth. We're inside of a real rift. The real shadowscape. At first, Gawain sniffed, as though there wasn't any possibility I could be right. But the more he took in our surroundings, the more realization dawned on his features. He swallowed thickly. We're inside of the shadowscape, he parroted. We have to get to Varlith and Aaron, I told him. We can't leave the gate unguarded, he argued, and I swore. Gawain was right. I'll go it alone, I declared, and I reached to my bandolier for a summon crystal, as the ground shook again. It was violent, and I was barely able to keep my footing. And then it stopped again. The air was quiet. Too quiet. In the shadowscape, I'd grown to learn that silence was never really silent. I just wasn't listening close enough. We have company, Gawain said suddenly. And sure enough, as soon as he summoned the fireballs to his hands, a swarm of Chatteroshi leapt from the rubble that used to be the audience stands. I grabbed the first crystal I felt and threw it to the ground. My little Kalgori appeared, and it danced around me, excited to be set free. Piece of cake, I smirked, and I flourished my arm as I sent it off into the fray. Multiply, I thought, and just as always, one Kalgori turned to 2, then to 4, then 8, until there were hundreds of tiny butterflies with razor-sharp wings flitting around the destroyed arena. Immediately they swarmed, and as they cut through the points of the horde, Gawain hurled several fireballs in the Chatteroshi's direction. Of those blasts, 2 of them landed on their designated marks, and they disintegrated the beasts to nothing but ash. The Chatteroshi retaliated, though, and the ones that weren't struck down by the flames or the Kalgori wings charged at us. My hand flew to my dagger, and Gawain to his gun. As the first of them reached us, I easily struck it down with a quick thrust of the blade through its skull. It crumbled to the ground, and blood seeped into my cloak as it vanished into dust. I ordered the Kalgori to swarm and attack again, and they swiveled in midair with precise synchronization. With an absolutely terrifying amount of speed, they sliced through the air like glittering knives, and cut down another large group of the Chatteroshi, with precision and grace. At the same time, Gawain had given up on his gun. Likely because there was a chance it wouldn't work properly, and cause more damage than good. Instead, he took a battle stance, and then launched a devastating flurry of attacks. Fireballs shot from his palms,
and he expertly dodged a Chatteroshi that had managed to slip through the barrage. He countered with a kick laced with fire straight to the head of the monster, and he stepped on it for good measure until it vanished too. Just like that, the swarm was defeated. Between Gawain and I, they were simply no match. I had barely broken a sweat. I recalled the Calgary back to its crystal, and I pumped my fist in the air with a triumphant shout. It might have been a small victory, but I did take some amount of pride in having been able to take them out so easily. "See? Piece of cake!" I yelled to Gawain, only Gawain didn't respond. I turned to face him, and immediately stopped in my tracks. A little girl stared at us from the center of the arena. Her hands were clasped behind her back, and she stood up, pinned straight. Her skin was pale and blue, and her eyes were glazed over as though she was blind. Bright white hair was braided into pigtails, and a gold chain with angel wings hung around her neck. She wore a little black dress that was covered in dirt, and she seemed to give off a sort of glow. It reminded me of my and Varleth's newly acquired weapons, but also of something else. Or rather, someone else. I couldn't place my finger on it, though, even as a chill swept through the shadowscape. "Are you okay?" Gawain asked her, but he received no answer. In fact, she didn't move at all. "Hello?" "Gawain," I muttered, and a warning was laced in my tone. I knew that something wasn't right. No one should be in here. Maybe she was a monster? That didn't seem right. And yet, I somehow knew that to be at least partially true. He ignored me, though, and he rushed forward towards the center of the arena, and towards the little girl. "Can you hear me?" he asked her again. "Do you need help? Gawain, stop!" I chased him down, though it seemed the closer I got to him and the little girl, the further away they became. It didn't make any sense. Finally, Gawain stopped, and I caught his arm before he could run off again. "Gawain, she's dangerous," I spluttered, and he roughly shoved me back. "She's just a little girl in danger," he shouted at me, and he tried to give her chase again, but again I caught his arm. "No, something isn't right about her, Gawain," I insisted. But again he yanked himself away. The little girl eyed us carefully, and then smiled at us as she giggled. The sound was beautiful, like the song of an angel, but her smile was off. There was no innocence to it, and it was filled with a sense of malice that left a dreadful feeling in the pit of my stomach. It clicked then. I knew who this little girl was, and she was no little girl. She was the angel from the rift in Bedima, the same angel that had tried to invert Bothy Highlands into the shadowscape. "Gawain, we need to leave," I told him, and he scoffed. "No," he argued. "We need to help her. She's dangerous," I reiterated, and again Gawain turned on me. "If you're too chicken shit to help her, fine. I'll do it alone," he spat, and when I reached for his arm again, he had already begun to sprint in her direction. I faltered as I screamed out for him. "Gawain, no! She's a monster!" I tried to move my feet, but something held me back. Magic, maybe? No. It was my indecision. It wasn't that I didn't want to follow Gawain, but there were other things at stake, too. The gate, for one, if that was even the real gate anymore, couldn't be left unguarded. Then there was the matter with Varleth and Aaron. I hoped they were okay. I felt like I had abandoned them, but other things were going on that needed to be handled, too. I ran my hands through my hair, and came to a decision then and there. I yelled in frustration, and then ran after Gawain. Chapter 15. I only made it a few feet, but my chest heaved as if I had run for miles. Time could be a bit wonky in the shadowscape, I knew, but I'd never experienced it quite like this before. Usually the time that passed was simply a different flow between the real world and this one. An hour in the shadowscape could have been 10 minutes on the outside. Reversely, though, like the case in Bothy Highlands, 6 days had passed in the real world before we made it out. To us, though, it was only a handful of hours. Maybe the weird time phases had something to do with the real shadowscape overlapping the mock one? That was a possibility, I was sure. I didn't have a full grasp on how the mock rift worked, though. I knew that it was some kind of projection magic, a charm specifically, but I couldn't wrap my brain around the monster aspect. Why use real monsters inside of a mock rift? They might as well have sent everyone into a real rift, so that maybe they could have done some real good, as opposed to dying fruitless deaths simply to prove themselves. We as mages had all kinds of magic, so why was it impossible to replicate monsters in the same fashion that a rift was simulated? Along those same lines, if it was necessary to use real monsters in the Magicae Nido, where did they have this stash of monsters that they unleashed within each round? And why wasn't there more protection, like soldiers on standby, in case a monster did get loose and make it through to the other side? I sighed, frustrated and desperate. This was not the time to dwell on the technicalities of a Magicae Nido. I had to find Gawain. My feet carried me as fast as they could. I weaved around what was left of the arena, but there was not a trace of him, or the little girl that had appeared before us. I wasn't that far behind them. Where could they have gone? It was like they simply vanished from existence. My chest heaved, and I panted. As I approached the middle of the arena where the little girl first showed herself, I noticed something on the ground. Amongst the rest of the debris and ruin was a stone that was mismatched from the rest of them. Where the arena walls were built of a yellowed, almost golden stone, this one was dark gray and stood out. There seemed to be some sort of aura emanating from it as well, as though it was calling out to me. I drew closer, and when I jogged to stop, I knelt down. I recognized this stone. It was the same kind that the tablet Varlith and I recovered from the thugs in the tavern was made of, and it had the same symbols that the book Orin found in the Shadowscape had in Bothy Highlands. My brow furrowed as I picked up the piece of flat rock. How was all of this connected? Did the angel monster, or in this case the little girl, have something to do with all this? Her warning the last time we met still rang in my ears. We want you to burn, to die, to be consumed. I shivered as I recalled the rasp of her voice as she spoke within my mind, and I pocketed the piece of stone. I didn't know what its purpose was, but I did know that there was no coincidence that it was here. I was meant to find it. I stood again and took in my surroundings. Everything felt weirdly out of place, and my sense of direction was warped. I cupped my hands and brought them up to my mouth. "Gawain!" I yelled, and then yelled again when there was no response. "Gawain, where are you?" I dropped my arms again and kept moving one foot in front of the other. There had to be some way I could get a better idea of what was going on. I needed a vantage point. Something higher that would give me a wider scope of what the Shadowscape had done to the environment. My initial thought was the tower where Sleet and the other faculty usually spectated from, at the far end of the arena. But there was nothing left of it. The only integral part that remained was the staircase, and even that wasn't as sturdy as I would assume it once was. It didn't go all the way up either, and so it wouldn't have given me the height I needed anyway. There has to be something, I muttered to myself out loud, as I continued to traverse the mess and wreckage. If only I had wings, or some sort of magic that could make me taller. I stopped dead in my tracks, and smirked at my own stroke of genius, as I plunked a crystal from my bandolier. I might not have had enough height on my own, but there was nothing that said I couldn't utilize my monsters. I turned the Baroker's crystal over in my hands. It was by far the tallest monster I had in my arsenal, but that also served as much of a problem as a solution. I still wasn't completely confident with my ability to summon large monsters. Yeah, I had gotten better, but even the Arachnus had proven to be difficult to control, and she was a third of the size. I clutched the crystal tightly as I found my resolve. I had to try. If I didn't, then my friends' lives might be in danger, and I couldn't live with myself knowing that I hadn't done anything to help them. With a great amount of focus and concentration, I pushed my mana through the crystal, and then smashed it on the ground. The Baroker grumbled to life as it rose up before me, a looming monolith of flame and steel. It stood before me as it awaited a command. There was an odd moment between us as it stared down at me, and I up at it. I had no business having control over a monster that was this powerful, but here it was in front of me, as though I were its lifeline, like it wasn't able to exist without me. That's when I remembered the question Arwen had asked me, when she tutored me for my written exams. When a summoner captured a monster, they invested part of their mana in the summoning, forming a bond greater than normal monsters. It made them obedient, easier to control, and required less mana to summon and maintain. But I had no idea it would be so dramatic of a difference. My Baroker, a grade A monster, took even less mana to maintain than a Wallerden. It was incredible, and I realized that I needed to be way more conscious of capturing monsters in the future. Black eyes continued to stare down at me, and sweat dripped from my brown hair with how close its flames were. Strangely enough, it didn't burn. It was warm, yes, but I didn't feel the same kind of sting I had when I had fought it only moments before. I forced my thoughts
to be repeating itself thousands of years from now.